But today I want to welcome Bryan Whittington. Thank you for coming. Bryan is a leader in sales, marketing, and business execution who works with fast growth companies in technology, manufacturing, and professional services. He has both built and helped his clients to build companies from startup to publicly traded companies like Wabtec and Thermo Fisher Scientific, just to name a few. So Bryan, I'm going to hand it over to you.
All right. Hey, thanks so much. Everybody can see the screen. And whenever I'm looking up, I'm actually looking at pictures. So I'd like to try to make this as interactive as possible. So whether you're eating or not, or anything that you're doing, as long as you feel comfortable, if you wouldn't mind popping up on screen, that way we can have a little bit of interaction and make this a little bit more fun. That would be wonderful. But here's kind of where I wanted to go today. And I'll be able to pivot and adjust based upon what you put in chat or let me know here. But I really want to know what makes this a good use of your time. Instead of me blathering on about all kinds of sales topics that you may or may not be interested in. Thank you, Bruce, for coming on camera. I appreciate that. I want to know what you want to cover here today. So in a second, I'm going to get that from you. So you can also put that in the chat or just come on camera or let me know there. I also want to go into the keys of this. I mean, in reality, it's this simple. Although it's simple, it's not always easy to do. So the simplicity is this. What goals do you have? And we'll talk about a couple of things on goal, then how to bring those goals to a strategy to achieve those. And then lastly, we'll hit some tactical execution of what's going to happen or how we can do that. Now, the challenge is this. There's nothing new under the sun. And this Ambrose Bierce said it best, right? There's nothing new under the sun, but there's a lot of old things that we don't know, or maybe some different ways that we can put a different perspective on it. So what I want to do is maybe reinforce some of the things that you know, but what I don't want to do is death by PowerPoint. So again, I want to make this as interactive and as fun as possible. So stop me, interrupt me, ask me questions, push back on areas that maybe you disagree with. I think having that type of dialogue and conversation is going to be more useful for everybody here. So with that said, let me get from you. What are the 1, 2, 3 things that you want to make sure that we cover here, that if we're going to spend roughly an hour's time together, what makes this a good time for you? So let me just be quiet, allow you to either shout it out or go ahead and put it in chat. I'm watching both. And by the way, whenever I'm looking at up, I'm actually looking at you. So that's kind of what I'm doing here, looking at a different screen. So what do you want to make sure that we cover here today? I'll be quiet and let you participate. Thank you, Michelle, for coming on camera. Oh, never mind.
Hey, Bryan, I have a question. I was curious if you might be able to share your thoughts on how, at an early stage, if you're in the idea or MVP stage or very early on in a business, how do you go about testing different revenue models without pissing off your current users and customers and confusing them?
Okay, that's a great question. We'll hit that one whenever we get into numbers and average customer value. So Jay, I had that marked down and we'll definitely be able to hit that, and we'll spend a little bit more time on that. But that's a really, really good question. And you might not like my wimpy response, but I'll give you a couple of different ideas there. What else? And again, you can throw it in the chat as well. Okay, well, feel free to jump in and put anything in chat, anything that you want to cover. But again, stop me, interrupt me, ask me questions as we get going along here. So here we go. All right, so we all know that a goal is easy, right? And if you look at New Year's resolutions, right? Most people's New Year's resolutions are already over. They've failed it completely. So whenever you're thinking about a goal, and we know it all, right? The SMART goals or SMARTer goals, specific, measurable, attainable or accountable, realistic and time-bound, we all know that. But here's where I'd like to challenge you to maybe think up your thought process a little bit differently, is to what end? Where are you going with this? Where are you headed? Are you going for funding? Like, for example, Jay was talking about, hey, I'm at MVP stage. I'm at new startup. So do you want funding? Do you want to hit exit? Or do you want to build and hold like what Joe is doing? So depending on what you truly want is really going to determine what this next step looks like. And what I'm hoping that you are not is like me, right? I can be a little bit schizophrenic. I can either over plan, and I've been a millionaire 16 times over on paper, and it looks so easy, and here's what my plan is. However, I can also overcomplicate it to where my plan looks like this, or maybe you struggle with so many people that I've seen where you can try to be a perfectionist and you get mired down in paralysis by analysis. So whatever you're really looking to do, I really encourage you for the keep it stupidly simple, keep that KISS theory going. And it really boils down to this. What's your goal? Where you're heading? And that can be summed up more easily when you know why. Now, I'm curious, you could do a thumbs up or raised hand on the pictures here. How many of you are running a business currently? How many of you have a business? Got one. All right, so one person has a business right now. It sounds like Jay might just be starting out. So the real challenge is, and Joe I know has a business too, the real challenge is as you're going along, it can be brutal and you can just get smacked around like you can't believe. So, you know, taking this from Simon Sinek, know why you're doing it, right? So for us, our mission is this, it's to help entrepreneurs or help communities thrive through entrepreneurship. And if you don't know why, you're willing to face the frustration, the people starting and stopping on you, quitting, the money, financial challenges, and getting rejected over and over and over again, because that's what sales is. Sales is a lot of rejection as you're going through, and you have to have this grit and this mindset to be able to do it. And if you don't have that why, listen, the easy thing is to tuck and roll, right? I'd rather tuck the covers back over my head, roll back over and go to bed. And if you don't have that why, it's a real easy to give up. So my real encouragement to you is know your why. What's the purpose behind it? And then as you start to hire new people onto the team, unless if you're funded, and even if you are funded because you're constantly looking at cash flow and runway, one of the things that you'll likely have to do is sell them on the passion, sell them on the mission, sell them on the culture that you're looking to build to be able to get them on. So one of the key things that I'd really encourage you to have is, even though this isn't sales, recruiting is sales. Running the business is sales. If you are the CEO, the founder, you are in sales, and you have to be better than everyone else at that. And so once you know the why and you can sell that why that with passion and purpose to the people that are coming along, then you need to figure out, all right, who do I want to come along with me? Because it's first who, then what. So this comes from Good to Great. I'm not sure if many of you have read it. I know some of us have, but it's a little older book at this point. Show of hands or let me know how many people have read Good to Great. All right, doesn't look like anyone. So let me submit this to you. Or there's a group called Reading Graphics. You can get off of Reading Graphics. It's like a 12 to 15 page summary of it, or just Google Good to Great. But it's one of the most pivotal books that I've read on business. And so it goes to the leadership, the first who, then what, and then it's really getting to the goals that you have. And I'll throw this out for your submission. And especially whenever you're starting, you can get backed into the corner of having to hit numbers. So for example, I was just on a call yesterday with a person, and he told me, he goes, Bryan, listen, it has to be this way because that's the way I planned it out. That's the way the numbers hit it. The challenge is, I don't care what your plan is, if the market won't allow it, if the marketplace says otherwise, it will not happen. And if you tell those that are giving you money, if you tell those on your team that this is what is going to happen, but market says otherwise, I would really offer you this idea with more flexibility. So whenever you're doing your goal setting, set a minimum number. Especially whenever you're starting, especially whenever you're trying to figure out those benchmarks, figure out the minimum number, right? And that minimum number might be, listen, I will be furious if I hit this number and that's the best I can do, but at least I know I shouldn't fire myself. At least I know that I shouldn't close my doors. So you can at least have a sigh of relief that this is at least good enough. So that's your minimum number. Then you have your target number, and that's the one that we share with everyone else. And lastly, a win number. That's your stretch number. Maybe you keep that to yourself. And the way that you can use this is you budget towards your minimum number, right? So you put a budget to your minimum numbers, and you make your activities, and we'll talk about activities and how to reverse engineer this in a minute, but then you take your activity levels to your win, because it's going to take a lot more effort than what most people believe and what most people are even willing to do. So when you look at your win numbers, create your activities and behaviors and your plans to do that. And then in between there, for cash flow purposes, you have to figure out, when are you going to put the chips in to maybe reinvest in the company, or to take that additional tranche of money, or to take that money that you had in reserve and trust the process, so you can continue to grow. Because we're going to talk about here in a little bit resource planning to be able to do that. Because if you don't know the size sales team that you need, you don't know the activity levels that you need until you figure out resource planning. So that's a real quick jaunt on goals. And I don't want to hit this too terribly much, but I do want you to think through this, because most people mess it up. They don't set realistic goals because they haven't figured out, and we'll hit this in a second, they'll ask, or they won't figure out what constraints are, what the challenges are going to be, so they won't hit the win goals. So I had a question here from Michelle. Would your win number or target number be your line in the sand? I would say your target number, well, whenever you, can you expand on line in the sand? Is that your make or break? Is that your break even? Or is that I'm closing everything down if I don't hit it?
It'd be probably your break even.
Break even, I would put maybe minimum number would be your break even. And I would put your target, that's your ideal, where you truly think that you can hit it, right? So here's a good exercise that you can do. If it's just you, you're going to have to do this in your head. But if you're with your team, you can do it this way. It's a real tactical, easy exercise to do. If you say, okay, here, ask them, what's the number? What do you think we can ultimately do? They might give you numbers, and the younger they are, the more they're going to blow out the numbers and be unrealistic. So you have to be careful of that. And we don't want to crush their dreams or their goals there. So it might be a question of, that's a great number. Boy, I would love to do that. Now, how do you suggest that we do that? And they'll start to quickly see that's likely an unlikable or unreachable number. Or the other side of that, you might see people that are playing it too safe. So get them to give you your number. And then once you get to what you believe is a realistic number, then ask this: do you think that we could get another 5%? So raise your hand if you think we could get another 5%, and you'll likely get everybody to raise their hand. Can you get 10%? Can you get 15%? And somewhere you're going to start to see people waver. And where you start to see people waver, that's whenever it starts to be unrealistic. And the subconscious mind is an incredible instrument. And if they don't believe it's true, they will do everything subconsciously not to allow it to happen. So that would be my suggestion for you, Michelle, to be your line in the sand, wherever they say, I really think that we can do it. That way it's a target goal that isn't quite that unrealistic stretch that you would have to have a whale or two or massive, all the stars and sun and moon to align to be able to hit it. That might be your win that you don't really tell anyone about. But again, you plan activity and behaviors and effort to the win, but will be happy and ecstatic with the target. So that to me would be my line in the sand. But Michelle, I don't know, what's your thought on that?
No, I think you explained it well, and I could agree with you.
All right, perfect. So let me ask you this, and we'll go to our first, ready, Allison? Let's go to our first poll. This is the first time that Allison has done a poll, so let's see if we can do this right. This is really exciting. So here's going to be the question. Hey, listen, I know my why. I use min and win numbers. I use both, or sheesh, I don't use either. So let's see if we can get that poll up. And Allison, if it's not working, we can skip it and pretend we did.
It's working. I have 7 of people are still answering, so I'll tell you as soon as I get. Okay. I had 8 of 14 answer so far, and 25% is I know my why.
It's pretty good.
25% is I use both, and 50% is I don't use either.
Okay. Well, for those of you that have your why, really, really pleased with that. And for the 50% that don't use either, listen, I come from a military background. My parents couldn't be any more down to earth. And I would never have believed this stuff in the past. And I cannot encourage you enough that it's not this super happy, touchy-feely stuff. It really gets to that motivation, and motivation has to be intrinsic. I mean, I don't like to say have to and must. However, if you don't have that intrinsic motivation of that why, then it gets really hard to face the demons that you're going to come up against. So my real encouragement to the 50% that don't have that why, really get it. And it takes some time, and it takes a lot of unpacking. So start the work there, and it really starts to be fun. And I would really suggest that it makes this next part a heck of a lot easier, because if you know your why, then the strategy is going to come through it, right? Because what is important to you will really help your strategy. And whenever I think about strategy, this is what I'm putting in terms of strategy. It's your go-to-market strategy. And I would put that, Jay, yeah, there you are, Jay. I would put that, Jay, part of your go-to-market strategy and into your starting off pricing, right? Also goes into your team structure and what I call smarketing, because right now it's not just sales, it's not just marketing. We're so integrated that it's really come into a smarketing process. So we're going to hit that. And then lastly, we're going to hit about what a lot of people consider as boring, but I'll give you a couple of ideas that hopefully what you'll find is this is a really good resource that I can get into positioning based upon this. So let's jump into this. The number one thing that I would suggest you do whenever it comes from a strategy standpoint is start with theories of constraint. Right now, I haven't studied this in depth, but whenever I was doing this, I didn't even realize I was doing it. And somebody said, oh, you're dealing with theories of constraint. So a lot of times people don't think about all the negative things that are going to happen. Because trust me, if something bad hasn't happened to you yet as a business owner, it will. Whether it's the taxes, whether it's new regulations that smack you upside the head with a fine, whether it's people quitting on you, whether it's cash flow issues, whatever the case may be, you're going to face it. And that theory of constraint is going to allow you to get ready. Now, I told you a little bit earlier about Jim Collins' Good to Great, whenever he talks about First Who, Then What. Another book that he had is called Great by Choice. And within that, he talks about two people. One is, I don't know how to pronounce his name, but it's Roald Amundsen. And he was the first person to make it to the South Pole. And another person, Robert Falcon Scott, his team also at the same time with, I think, a lot more funding, went down and tried the same approach. But the difference between these two is the one that succeeded, they were disciplined and they followed and they put a discipline and self-constraint on them that they call it the 20-mile march, right? So in that 20-mile march, they no matter how good the weather was, how bad the weather was, they did the 20-mile march. Whereas Robin Falcon Scott, if it was nice weather, they pushed 40, 50, 60 miles. And on bad weather, they didn't go anywhere. But if you push that hard, you're going to get sore and beat up. And what happened was Amundsen's team won, and they made it back or down and back. Scott and his team, they were found dead the next spring. So those theory of constraints come to play. So, oh, nice. So Joe said that he was just reviewing that with his team yesterday. So let me give you a super tactical and easy way to use this. So we practice, I used to be an integrator on this, but we practice what's called Traction, the Entrepreneurial Operating System. I'm not sure if many of you have heard of it, but it's a really nice programmatic way of building out your operating system within your organization. And one tool that they have, I have showing here on the screen, they call it the accountability chart. So this accountability chart looks very similar to what you would have in just an org chart, right? And then scaling up does something pretty interesting too. Let me just find my pen here. Scaling up, they do something which is pretty interesting too. So whenever you're looking at building up your team, you can say this would be revenue, this would be profit, And then this right here would be efficiency, operations, right? So whenever you're looking to break up or build out your organization, you can break it up like that. And then if you notice on this, whenever they'll have specific roles and responsibilities here. One thing that I would ask you to do is not stop there. One thing that I think that they're missing off of this is putting what are success metrics. So for example, if we were looking at sales, maybe sales would be how many outbound attempts per day, how many conversations per day, how many meetings per week, per month, what's the number in pipeline at any given time. So whatever success characteristics that you would have, put a specific measurable number on there. And then that way, once you know those numbers, that's whenever we can put theories of constraint to work. So for example, if I'm Jay and I say, okay, based upon this pricing, our average customer is this, profit margin's this, I need to hit this number. In order to hit that number, I'm going to need X amount of sales. Well, in order to hit X amount of sales, then I can reverse engineer it. So a real quick reverse engineering, and if you'd like, I'll put my information on in the chat there, but you can reach out to me through LinkedIn. I have a couple of resources that you can use from this, but really you do the math of sales. So off of the math of sales, you would look at something like this, where you go, okay, in order for me to get one sale, how many first-time appointments ever do I need? And really, you're going to likely see somewhere between, if it's really simplistic, not expensive, maybe self-subscribe, but you need a salesperson in there. Maybe it's between 5 and 8 first-time appointments ever to one closed one. If I have more of a complex enterprise type sale, then that's going to likely take 10, 12, 14 first-time appointments ever to one closed one. So whatever that number is, get to know that number, and then I can take my theory of constraints and pull that back on here and say, okay, well, I know that they can only do roughly 2,500 attempts per month, or maybe it's 1,000 attempts per month, depending on what else you have them doing. So the average number out there is people are doing about 48 to 50 attempts per month. So how many conversations is that? Each conversation is going to be roughly 8 minutes. How many meetings a week do they need? Okay, for each meeting, do I need 45 minutes with prep and the running the meeting? Is it an hour? And we put all of that together, and that's where you get your theories of constraint. So now I can say, okay, well, if I need to have blanket number sales per month, and they can only do this amount of work from time constraints, that means I need a team of this size. Therefore, I'm going to need a revenue target of this. So I'm going to need to change my pricing structure. So it's not as simplistic as what we might like, but it really gets into the math of sales. And I can send that spreadsheet that I just showed. I can send that to you, and you can leverage that for your math of sales. But that is where you get your theories of constraint. And you can also use this for hiring. So if I'm going to hire somebody, I'm going to say, hey, listen, Jake, I don't know what you're expecting here, but we need you to do at least 100 dials a day, 125 dials a day. So that's 2,500 a week, that 2,500 a month. So that is for you to set appointment a day. If you're not willing to do that, let's not even have you start here. So if you know what is expected, you can start to use that from your recruiting. So I've been yakking a lot. Let me just stop and ask questions, thoughts, feedback on this, because I can spend hours and hours and hours on this, but I don't want to go too deeply on this because it's a little bit more operational. But if we don't do this, we can't build up our sales team. So let me just stop. Questions, thoughts, feedback on this portion of it. It's a very quiet group today.
Yeah, I have a question.
Thank you, Bruce.
So this is assuming that the business has like understood that their products are really appealing to the customers, right? Because oftentimes in the startup, like they make a lot of assumptions that this product will be sold in the market, but realize later on that customers not really want this in the end. And I think you're explaining about the operation of setting up the sales team based on that customer development has been validated.
I would agree with that, Bruce, right? So if we look at our minimal viable product, we want to go, so everything that we've been talking about here is right. So I'm going to have a minimal viable product. And to be able to take this to market, I'll need to do these things. If I'm not quite there, then I would really encourage the leadership, especially the founder, the owners, because those are going to be the ones that care the most about it. And those are going to be the ones who know the most about it. And I would put specific KPIs on me, key performance indicators on me as the owner, and say, hey, I'm going to have an interview of X amount of people per over the next amount of time. And I'm going to have specific interview questions to really make sure that they like this, and work to get some beta clients to make sure that they enjoy it. So it's really, Eric Ries has a lot of stuff on it. I'm sure that you're familiar with him, and somebody might be able to help me out. The gentleman from Stanford, something Short, I think is his name, but if you, I'll look it up, Bruce. But he has some really good things. If you're pre-MVP, pre-commercialization, those are really good resources, especially Eric Ries and the Lean Startup that came out of that. Does that help you at all?
Yeah.
Okay. Are you familiar with Eric Ries, the Lean Startup?
The author of the book?
The book, yes.
Yes.
Okay, perfect. So he has some good stuff. And if you know, anyone know who I'm talking about? The guy from Stanford, something Short. Or, yeah, something Short. I'll look it up and find it and kick it over to Alice, and she can push it out to the team. So off of that, and to go to what you were saying, Bruce, it really gets into experimentation. Let's use the scientific method, and really it's just testing. It's doing that MVP, testing and putting in benchmarks. So for example, we've made a massive pivot in our organization. So I could tell you my numbers in my sleep because I've been dealing with them for 10, 15 years in that particular vertical, that particular industry. Whenever we shifted, we had to start all over again. So we had to do benchmarks. And recently read a book called How to Measure Anything. And the key takeaway that I got from that book and How to Measure Anything is if you have no idea, you can get a 90% likelihood of a guess pretty darn quickly. And with the more data that you get, the more quickly you can hone in the numbers. So if you don't have this information yet, let me really encourage you to get these benchmarks. And then even with the minimal data, you can get a tighter and tighter sense of 90% accuracy to be able to do this. And then you build your desired outcome. And much like Stephen Covey, where you reverse engineer, you start with the end in mind, and then you reverse engineer all of the activity levels to get there. So if this is what we're looking for, that accelerated growth, what is it going to take? And then what resources would we have to be able to get there? So if we look at it like this, so Jay, let's go to your question right here. How can I take, if I'm at an MVP stage, how can I test the market? So there's another book called Value-Based Pricing. I can't recall the author of that one, Jay, but I'd submit that one to you. But have you figured out how to determine the ROI from what your solution will bring, Jay?
No, not exactly. I'm still more in the idea phase.
Okay, so here's what I might suggest you do. As you're starting to talk to people, ask them, because by the way, here's what you're going to find for everyone on this call. What you're going to find is most people do not know how to figure out return on investment. They don't know how to do business case, and that's why it takes so long to get somebody to make decision, because nobody makes it easy for them to buy. So Jay, are you at liberty to say kind of what your idea is, or is it still top secret?
Sure, yeah. No, I can definitely do that. Essentially, I'm thinking about enabling via technology a way for small business owners like sub 5 million in revenue to buy and sell businesses. So think like Zillow for small businesses. And so in my initial hypothesis, the business case is essentially not having to pay a business broker, which is the main way people buy and sell businesses of that Main Street businesses today, that fee. And that fee is typically 10 to 12% of the transaction value, which is enormous. So my hypothesis is with technology, maybe we could use like 2 to 3%. You're saving 10% on the transaction value as a seller. That's a huge ROI, but that's going to vary, and I still want to validate that.
Okay, got it. So on that one, so with that large of a difference, then it really would be identifying, well, you could do it right off of this. So what the average value of that sale is going to be, and then the number of transactions. So do you think that they would use it once, Jay, multiple times?
Yeah, I mean, I would imagine for most mainstream businesses, this is a one-time thing, but like it could be, in theory, the amount of times you buy and sell a home, because we're thinking very similar values, right? These could be businesses selling from, $500,000 to $1 million total. So probably no more than 2-3 times in your lifetime, but most likely once.
Yeah, so on this one, it might be a little bit more challenging because you're doing more of a one-off type of thing. So it's going to go, and you've already laid it out, it's pretty good ROI. So typically speaking, people, the number I always use, and I'd be interested with everybody else's experience on this call, because there's a lot more experience on this call than just little old me. Typically, what I find is if I have $100,000 solution, I want to find at least $1 million of upside of either savings or potential net new revenue. Some people look 3 to 5 years of payoff, but on yours, Jay, it's really that big of a saving. So whenever you're talking, you can save 10%. What type of a number is that? A 10%, would that be 500,000, so like $50,000 kind of thing is what they would be paying?
The broker, yeah, exactly.
Okay, so for you, they would be paying 3,000 to 5,000.
Exactly.
Okay, so that's how I would do it right there. And if that 3,000 to 5,000, which by the way, you are in the most challenging number out there, because if you're less than $7,000 profit per transaction, that's where it starts to be really interested on your go-to-market, because a sales development model is really hairy because there's not quite enough profit, especially if you don't have a lifetime value of a customer, Jay. It's going to be a little bit more difficult because you won't have the money to be able to pay an SDR, BDR. And I don't know what quantity will need to be happening. And I don't know, well, if you're doing like a Zillow kind of thing, maybe you can do a self-subscribe, but those are all things that are going to have to come into play. Go ahead, Jay.
Yeah, I was just gonna say that's the idea. There wouldn't be an actual paid sales force. It would be more of a product-led sale.
Okay, got it. So that's going to be heavy marketing led and super easy user experience. So yeah, if you could do that for 3 to 5, that would be pretty decent. So for all of you here, just keep those numbers in mind whenever you're doing this, because whenever I was working with that gentleman yesterday, he was trying to figure out, well, should I do a sales development team, meaning an SDR, BDR with marketing going into it, and then an AE to close it? Whenever we looked at the cost of that, his total sale was about $5,000 per transaction, but the total customer acquisition cost, whenever you look at it, it's not cost of goods sold. Whenever we're in a services-based industry, it's all of your sales and marketing costs divided by how many net new customers you think you're going to get. And that really is where your customer acquisition cost goes. So if you look at your numbers here, right over here in this column, that if you have a $75,000 SDR, that's going to be the cost of every single dial that they make. And so if you have this breakdown right here, and this is where benchmarking and knowing your numbers is so vitally important. If your outreach, let's say if you close 1 in 14, so you have more of an enterprise sale, more of a complex type sale. So I might be $50,000, $100,000 enterprise sale with maybe 7 to 10 buyers, right? So that's kind of the complexity here. As opposed to down here, maybe I'm a small to mid-size sale. I have 1 to 3 call close, maybe 4. So it's going to be 1 in 8. So depending on what I'm doing, these two numbers right here, your outreach to reply rate and your conversation to meetings booked rate, that's going to be your most important number, because if I can most influence those and affect those, then notice what it is. If I can bump this up to 9%, that number changes drastically. And even if my average sale goes down, you can see on this one, I lose money with every sale. But if I can get my engagement and reply rate up, I can have a customer acquisition cost of this. So knowing your numbers is critically important to go along into this. So let me just stop, hit a lot of numbers. I know all of you here are probably really, really good with numbers. Questions, feedback, pushback on what I just laid out here. Okay. So question for you. You ready to do the next poll, Allison?
Yep, I'm ready.
All right, so let's hit that poll. And so here's the question. Looking at your numbers, how confident are you? Are you 100% confident that you know your numbers, from your pricing structure to your benchmarks, to be able to really reverse engineer and do this theory of constraints? Or is it that you're just getting started out? Or, you know, hey, we are already on our way, so we just got to start figuring this out? Or, you know what, we're going to get this thing started today? Or is it, hey, you know, who cares? We got it.
All right, we had 58% participated.
Okay.
So we will start to figure this out. Starting today is 57%.
Nice. Good.
Just started to figure them out is 29%. And then 100% confident that you know your numbers is 14%.
All right. Somebody knows their stuff. Well done. All right. Yeah. In getting started today. So best methodology for you. Listen, I'd love to tell you CRM. You're going to get pushback on CRM. If you go old school with spreadsheets, I don't care which way they do it, just do it in a way that everybody would do it consistently, but consistency is the key. So really, really pleased to hear 57% of you are going to get started today. All right, so let me talk to you about another idea which really gets into positioning. So under positioning, we can look at it in several different ways. And the idea that I'd like you to have, the picture that I'd like to have you in the mind is there's a book a while back, it's a little bit older, by Chet Holmes. And he pointed out this, and this is really interesting. If you think about it, most of the marketing that we're going after is the 3% of those that are ready to buy today. Now, the only challenge whenever we go after those who are ready to buy today, that's whenever they've already done their research and they're looking at 2, 3, 4, 5 different alternatives. So you're going to have margin compression. You're going to have a lot of competition. And author's Harry from Michelle Roy. I'm sorry, Michelle, I missed that one. Who's the author? Harry McDivitt for which one? Yeah, if you think of it, just put it in there. But anyway, the 3% have an immediate need. So that is where the most competition is going to have. Now, this 7% right here, these are folks that are thinking about it in the next quarter or two. They've identified it as a problem. And really the goal as a sales team, if you want to really do well, is be able to hit this group right here. And that's going to come from having proper positioning and really being able to get in front of them and speaking to their problems in a way that shows that you truly understand. So there's 2 resources I'm going to give you. One is by April Duniford. She wrote a book called Obviously Awesome. And she has the most practical book on positioning that I've ever read. And the second resource, excuse me, I got rather quite sick over the holiday and still recovering, so forgive me. She's on episode 53 of her podcast called The Talent, Sales, and Scale Show. And she really lays it out there brilliantly and beautifully and simply, and has a lot of resources. So if you look her up, April Dunford, and Obviously Awesome, and she lays it out this way. If you can identify what they're doing today, and that's where a lot of people are scared to do that, right? If you can speak into, hey, likely speaking, you're doing X, Y, and Z, whether they're having an intern do it, whether they're doing it on a spreadsheet, or whatever alternatives they're doing today, is being able to really speak to that. And then you lay out why that's bad, and then what alternatives that you bring to the table that are going to be profoundly better, and then what value What value does that customer really appreciate? And then identify that target. And it really goes to this. If you look, excuse me, if you look at your sales process, and I was so wrong on this, so please, please, please don't do what I did. Whenever I originally started the business, I thought a list is a list is a list. But what I came to find is your list is your market. I mean, that is the key piece. If you can identify that ideal customer profile, the companies, the demographics, the firmographics, and then the title. And then within each of those titles, you're able to identify why is it important to them? What is a C-suite doing differently than a VP, differently than a director, differently than a frontline worker? And all of those are impacted, and knowing how each and every one deals with it. If you can dig down and really identify that within your ICP list, that's going to be 90% of what you're working on. That's going to give you your messaging. That's going to give you your target. And that's going to give you your approach of how you do it, right? So if I'm going after CTOs, CIOs, then that's going to be completely different methodology and platforms than if I'm going somebody in sales and marketing, right? So being able to identify those and laying out the alternatives is critically important. And then you can take it down through your sales funnel. So I cannot suggest to you enough going out and getting this and specifically laying out the alternatives. And in a couple of minutes, we'll close out with a couple of tactical execution on how to use this. Okay, so questions on that before we move on to tactics. And again, I'm going pretty high level to give you an idea. And then any questions or specifics, feel free to reach out to me. I don't have anything to sell you. I don't have any companies that I'm taking on in the consulting role anytime soon. We have free training for sales, so we're not going to charge you for anything there. So anything that you need, I'm here to help you out. So let's move to strategy and execution if you don't have any questions. Okay, so here's where we want to go. Business development, prospecting, demand generation, whatever you want to call it, right? How do we go about that? And up until this point, there's been a lot of tension. So let me just be quiet and allow you to read this real quick. I mean, sales and marketing have been at each other forever, right? Your leads are horrible. You know, no, you never call anyone. Your sales team is horrible, and this back and forth and back and forth. But with the advent of all this technology, it's really a time that we're going to look at this and call it more smarketing, because even with you, Jay, where it's self-service, sometimes you need somebody to push them over the edge. Sometimes they need to talk to a human oftentimes. And that's really where this marketing comes into mind. So here's the idea. HubSpot has some great information out there, and they're wonderful in the amount of resources that they offer. But HubSpot says this: if you look at an MQL, so a marketing qualified lead, so let's put some definition to a marketing qualified lead. That would be one that fits the right demographics, psychographics, firmographics, geographics, all of that stuff. But we don't necessarily know if they're ready to buy, right? So that would be an MQL. So of all of the leads that are generated, and I'd be curious what you hear out there, but oftentimes whenever I hear from marketing, if they can push 4 to 10 MQLs to you in a month, they're happy. But 4 to 10, if only 2% of those are going to go to close, I'm going to need a lot of those leads to be able to do it. And so that's really where I'm going to suggest that marketing alone, or especially if you're just starting, marketing alone oftentimes won't get you there. This gentleman, Chris Walker, he has a podcast, really good organization, specifically around marketing for technology, called Refine Labs. Really, really good content. I would check him out. A lot of good stuff on LinkedIn. But his numbers is only 1% is going to close of the MQL. So, I mean, it's a lot of work and a lot of effort. And because of that, especially after the shutdown, and I can send you this link or just look up or from HubSpot. This comes directly from HubSpot, and I just pulled this yesterday. If you notice, This goes starting right before pre-pandemic. Once the pandemic hit, look at what happened to emails. The amount of emails going out, especially in sequencing, shot up. And look at the reply rates. They just keep going down and down and down. So the amount of noise out there is incredible. And so because of that, people started making telephone calls. So people are starting to cold call a lot more. But you know what? If you have one of these, it's getting more and more challenging to hit it because, you know, it comes up likely spam call or doesn't, if you're not in the address book, your call's not going through. And especially the younger generations, they're not talking on the telephone. So you can see how much the sales calls have gone up. So the market is just saturated out there. And so really it boils down to your list. It's not everything, but it's pretty close to it. So whenever you look at the list, there's a couple of companies out there. So a shameless plug for ours. There's a couple of companies out there, but what we do is prospecting intelligent leads. So to get through all of this noise, one, get quality of list. So don't just buy a list, get quality of list. And then two, if you're able to find organizations like ours, and there's a couple of us out there, where you can identify who will pick up the telephone and at what number, who's going to be on LinkedIn, because believe it or not, if the only about 15% of the members on LinkedIn are on LinkedIn more than once a month. So a lot of times people go, oh, do telephone, do email. But whenever you see all the mountain of emails, it's really hard to break out. And so they say, well, do LinkedIn. Well, 15% of the members are on there that less than one time a month. So we have to know what channel to go through. So if you can get a list that have already pre-populated who to call, who to target through LinkedIn, and then the rest is email, that's going to save you about 40 to 60 hours per month per salesperson to do that. So your list is really everything. So really be able to sift and sort it. So let me give you this strategy to be able to take your database to be able to do that. And so I call this a tiering system. So whenever you look at that tiering system, so we talked a little bit earlier about what numbers to expect. So let me come back to that real quick. So if you look at these numbers here, this level right here, this 2.5, that's going to be for a cold list, and that's going to be typical. Usually a list is going to give you 1.5 to about 3.5 engagement rate. So expect that. If you call through it a little bit more, you might be able to get it up to about a 9 to a 15%. The best we've ever seen is a 30%. So what that does to you right here, that massively reduces the amount of outreach that you'll need. So just keep that in mind whenever you're thinking through this and why that list is so important. So whenever you look at that list, that new data, that's going to be your 1.5 to 3.5 data. Then you validate it. So for example, we have humans that are actually picking up the phone, that are using technologies to check emails. So there's a lot of ways to validate that information. And please, 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 especially if you're doing email marketing, please make sure that your emails are good, because you can get your whole entire communication channels shut down if you have too many bounds or you're going into bad emails. And then a tier 3 would be those that actually pick up the phone, or those that we know will engage over LinkedIn or a particular platform. So a tier 3 is one that you've had a conversation with, but you've not been able to set a meeting. Now, here's the interesting thing. If you can build out your list of tier 3s, you're going to be about 300% more likely to set a meeting with that person if you just do this one thing. And it's this simple. Here it is. If you say, hey, Jake, you and I spoke about a month ago, I caught you at a really bad time, is now equally bad, just by referencing a previous time. And especially if you can give a specific about that, that's whenever we can get somebody to engage with us. We've built up trust and they're going to engage with us more. So that gets to tier 3. A tier 4 is your booked meeting, and then please do strategic account management. So if you have a lifetime value customer, that's strategic account management for cross-sell, upsell, retaining them, that's where your profit lies, because this net new business is the most expensive business to get. Your cross-sell, upsell, and we all know this is where the profit, the majority of profit comes, and then throw out anything that's bad. And so if we're able to do that, we can use our cold outreach a lot more effectively. So we're running out of time here. So let me go through this really quickly. If you have a ton of money and you can do marketing, great. Also add sales development to it, because marketing is going to take you about 12 to 18 months to have that machine going. So reinforce it with some cold outreach as well. And then on this mindset, what you want to do is have this mindset of to deliver value or go away, right? And that mindset really comes from this: some will, some won't, so what, next. And so, if you had a whole bag of coins and you had a gumball machine and your customer was a green one, you wouldn't get in your mind about, oh, we have a horrible business, oh, I'm a horrible salesperson. If you kept getting different colored gumballs, you just keep putting the coins in. So if you have a sales team, getting that mindset right of some will, some won't, so what, next is critically important, because sales is a head game. It's a grit game. So have that mindset going in, and then leverage this 4-step process. So this is based on a couple of things. So my years at Sandler, whenever I was at Sandler, there's a really good person by the name of Josh Bryan, who has a really good calling campaign, but it's really this. It's 4 steps where you build trust. And that building of trust comes from knowing the person. It's getting a permission-based opener, so you're not that stereotypical salesperson of, hey, how are you today, right? Which nobody cares, and you instantly know that you have a salesperson. So permission-based opener, and then you lead with the conversation with questioning, and then finally a call to action. So let me scream through this to give you what it's going to look like. You build trust because you are leveraging their profile. So whether it's this profile or something like that, you adapt to their communication style, and then you're going to mirror and match their tone, their volume, their pace, however their jargon, their language. You're going to mirror and match that to create trust. We do that naturally with our friends. So what I'm asking you to do here is being able to do it intentionally. And then it's not about the relationship. So let me just repeat that. Sales is not about the relationship. It's about building trust. That's what we're really looking for. So the permission-based opener would be something like, hey, listen, I know I'm calling out of the blue, likely catching a bad time. Do you mind if I share with you the reason for my call? That's a permission-based opener. And most people are going to say yes. Or if you call them back again, because they hung up, it's, hey, you and I spoke back on the 18th. I caught you at a horrible bad time. It is now equally bad. And that's whenever you can get engaged. And then you go through curiosity statements. So this goes back to the positioning. The positioning statement is laying out the alternative. So Jeff, typically speaking, whenever I'm talking with other founders like you, I usually hear things like, we're doing A, which is problem, B, which is problem, or maybe we're leveraging C. So I don't know which of those, if any, are you using, and that engages them in the conversation. And then we're just asking questions and bringing value and sharing with them stuff that they might not know. So much like a challenger sales model, where we teach, tailor, and take control, we're giving business insights, and we keep asking those questions and diving down deeper until we can get to this, the 3 magic questions. And so we get them to the conversation where if they bring up a challenge, well, can you give me an example? Magic question number 1. Question 2, because of that, what? And then question number 3, with or without my help, is this something that you need to get solved? And that leads you to your call to action, which you say, hey, I really appreciate it. Let me make this suggestion. You do an embedded command and you set the appointment. And if you want to go through email, here's the way that you can do a very similar approach through email. Make sure that subject line is 1 to 3 words. Use their name when appropriate. That's going to really up the reply rate. Less than 50 words. So believe it or not, less than 50 words is what you need. And make sure that view pane is a really good, engaging first sentence. No jargon, so you don't want to use any ROI in it. Don't put marketing. No pictures, no links or anything like that. It's just straightforward, ideally a question kind of thing with 1 call to action, with a low threat call to action. And then if you have the ability, just do a sequencer where it's, putting them on multiple touches, because one approach, it's not going to work. You need 5, 6, 7 Heck, you would even hear up to 14 approaches. So that's going to be the email. So with that said, hopefully you got some ideas out of this. I'll put in here my LinkedIn, or we can send that out. And if you have any questions off of this, feel free to do that. So thank you very much. I can hang out here if you have any questions to close this out.
Nice job, Bryan. Thanks.
Hey, thanks, Joe. Appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you, Bryan. This is great. Does anybody have any questions? Okay. Well, if we don't have any questions, we can end the Connects today, and we hope to see everybody at more Connects.
All right. Hey, thanks, everyone. Appreciate it. Be well.
Thanks. I'm going to end the meeting for all.